Here's a reading from my latest book, A Different Boy. This is based on my own experiences as a migrant leaving the UK. I remember the boat pulling out in Southampton and the band playing that sad song, "Now is the hour when we must say goodbye. Soon you'll be sailing far across the sea. When you return, oh please remember me." Well, the boy in my story really wants to be on that boat. He has nobody to remember him. He's an orphan. He's just escaped from a terrible place. If he gets dragged back there, the cruelty and the loneliness and the meanness of that place will be what he has to look forward to. So he's standing there on the pier where the boat is leaving, and how he wishes he was on it, how he wishes he was going to a new place, a place of hope. And so he's run away, he's standing watching the passengers, and this is what happens. The ship was a towering fortress. That's the way Anton thought about it. He had never even seen a building as big as the ocean liner that loomed over the pier. But he knew what it was and where he was going and where it was going. He stared enviously at the people lining up in front of the wide gangplank. How he wished that he was one of the chosen ones, heading off on a voyage to a land of peace and plenty, leaving the land of broken buildings and crushed hopes behind, looking forward to sunshine and steaks, to adventure in the forests and mountains, a place to grow and prosper. Parents were herding their happy children onto the gangplank and onto the waiting deck above. A band played a tune to the huge crowd lining the pier, a sad, sweet melody of longing and hope. Teary relatives waved as they farewelled the lucky emigrants. A blanket of sadness swept over Anton. Even if he had a place on the ship, there would be no one to remember him. There would be no tears or goodbyes. If he sailed away to the new land, not one person would miss him. No one at Wolfdog Hall even knew his first name. He stood there transfixed as the line of impatient travellers began to dwindle. Eventually only a few stragglers were left waiting for the two uniformed officers to check their boarding passes. How Anton wished he was holding one of those magic pieces of paper. A thin woman dressed from head to foot in black was one of those left aboard. An impatient official was waiting for her to find something in the bottom of a bulging bag. A tall boy of about 14 or 15 was standing behind her. The boy grinned at Anton with an overgenerous smile and pulled his coloured beanie down over his ears. "Don't go near the edge, Max," the woman said without looking up. The boy didn't seem to hear his mother. She called out over her shoulder, "Stay there, Max." "Stay there, Max," the grinning boy mumbled back. He wasn't really listening. He was staring at Anton. One of the ship's crew was already loosening the gangplank ropes. He paid no attention to the boy or Anton. There was something odd about the boy's face. It seemed unusually smooth. It reminded Anton of a porcelain doll's head, without a blemish or a wrinkle. The boy's jumper was covered in ribbons, badges and labels, awards for everything from dog shows to athletic events. There were also buttons with pictures proclaiming dozens of causes. Anton smiled. The boy looked like a human notice board. His smile faded when he saw that the boy was also wearing a black armband. It reminded Anton of the one he had been wearing himself only a few weeks ago. Almost hidden among the clutter on the boy's chest were 2 brass medals, which Anton knew were awarded to brave soldiers who had died in battle. The boy was grinning and nodding and pointing at Anton, who smiled in return. "I'm Anton," he said. "I'm Anton," said the boy. "No, you're Max," said Anton. "You're Max," said Max. He tapped Anton's chest with one finger. "Ah, that's what you want," said Anton. He unclipped the small safety pin and handed over his label. He smiled back as the boy clumsily pinned it to himself. The boy began pointing at his own chest. "Read, read, read," he yelled excitedly. "Oh, Muller," said Anton. Anton looked at the boy's face for a response, but there was none. He suddenly realised the reason for the boy's porcelain appearance. He had no eyelashes or eyebrows. Anton guessed that under the beanie he had no hair either. One of the sailors looked up. He was anxious to go. "Are you 2 together?" he asked. "2 together," said Max. The sailor nodded and turned back to his rope. Max held out a hand and started to laugh crazily. "Shake, shake, shake!" he yelled. Anton took Max's hand and the boy pumped it up and down. They grinned at each other. Max took a step towards the gangplank and, still hanging tightly onto Anton's hand, pulled him along behind. Anton felt himself being led up the gangplank. He followed like a small child. He could not believe that he was allowing this to happen. He was boarding the ship without a pass. His feet seemed to belong to someone else. They were taking him upwards towards the deck. For a moment he looked back across the streets still littered with rubble from the war. It was dreary and dangerous, a land full of orphans and queues for food, and places with pools full of piss. It was dangerous land, but it was all he knew. Bad as it was home. He looked up the gangplank. The boat beckoned. It might lead him to rugged mountain ranges and jewel seas. But what about droughts and flooding rains? He was possessed by an overwhelming sense that something huge was happening, that if he took another step, nothing would ever be the same again. He hesitated and took another step. He followed Max up onto the deck where the boy's mother was waiting. She wore a sad expression, but seemed pleased to see them arrive hand in hand. "You've found a friend, Max," she said. "That's lovely." She shouted something else, but it was drowned out by the mournful growl from the ship's funnel. The railings were lined with waving people, pleased that they had reached the top of the long waiting list and held tickets to a better place, unhappy that their loved ones were not able to follow. Those sailing and those staying all knew the same thing. The ship held 600 people. It was the last voyage, and the people left behind would stay behind. The deck was crowded, and there was much jostling as the emigrants sought one last glimpse of their loved ones. Ropes were released, the gangplank withdrawn. A deep-throated whoop, whoop filled the air. Tugs pushed and churned. The band played on as an ever-widening river of sea emerged between the dock and the ship. It seemed to Anton that the people on the pier below were receding into the past like sad memories. The tugs departed and the ship's propellers began to thrash and bite into the water. Finally, the farewelling crowd faded altogether, and the pier became nothing but a thin line floating on the edge of the bay. The passengers began to desert the railings and go searching for their cabins. The excitement seemed to have drained into the grey sea as the emigrants accepted that they had left home forever. Loss made their good fortune hard to enjoy. New friend, new friend, new friend, laughed Max. His mother threw a questioning smile at Anton. Where are your parents? She asked as she took Max's hand. Anton tried to stop the fear showing itself on his face. He scrabbled unsuccessfully to find an answer. He stared at the numbers on the cabin doors behind her, but they were of no use. He pointed at a row of doors further along the deck. She looked surprised. Aren't you lucky? A deck cabin. She started to walk away, but Max pulled back. One friend, one friend, one friend, he yelled. It's all right, dear, said Max's mother. He can visit whenever he likes. Then she added, if his parents agree. Parents agree, said Max. We're in C-32, she told Anton. In steerage. Anton smiled at Max. I'll see you later, Max, he said. Later, Max, the boy replied with a pout. Then he shouted, don't go, like boy, like boy. Anton knew that he had to go. He also that he had nowhere to go. He turned and hurried along the deck. Come and visit, Max's mother called after him. My name is Pat. The crowd on the deck had gone, and it was growing cold. A chill wind was blowing from the north, and the sun was sinking into a cold and unforgiving sea. And if you want to know what happens, you'll have to buy the book. See ya.